Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our session From Strategy to Action, How NOAA Aims to Put More U.S. Seafood on American Plates. I'm Megan Emery. I'm a communication specialist with NOAA's Southeast Fisheries Science Center, and I am thrilled to be moderating this panel discussion today about this exciting topic. So just a reminder to kick us off, Capitol Hill Ocean Week has always been centered in engaging in thoughtful dialogue, building bridges, and embracing solutions to meet the world's greatest challenges by harnessing the power of collective action and innovation. We ask that you please respect our experts, speakers, partners, and fellow attendees. Today, I'm joined by three panelists who are leading innovative efforts that are fostering real impact across the nation's seafood sector. Danielle Blacklock, Director of the NOAA Fisheries Office of Aquaculture. Sarah Schaffler, NOAA Fisheries National Seafood Strategy Coordinator, and Carissa Gervasi, Assistant Scientist with the University of Miami at NOAA's Southeast Fisheries Science Center. During the discussion, we welcome you to share any questions you have in the Q&A in your Zoom screen, and we will address as many of your questions as we can at the end of the panel. And before we get to know our panelists a little bit better and learn more about their amazing work, I'd like to set the stage a little bit for this discussion. So seafood plays a vital role in U.S. food security and is the foundation of our coastal communities. NOAA Fisheries is committed to revitalizing the domestic seafood sector and ensuring more American seafood is on American plates. The 2025 Executive Order, Restoring American Seafood Competitiveness, outlines the President's vision of making the United States the global leader in sustainable seafood. And U.S. seafood is responsibly fished and farmed under some of the most robust and transparent standards in the world. Plus, seafood is good for people. It's one of the best sources of nutrients that are essential for our health and well-being at every stage of life. It is critical to providing food to a growing global population and a foundational part of the culture and identity of our coastal communities. Plus, seafood's good for the economy. NOAA's most recent Fisheries Economics of the United States report showed an overall economic impact of more than $300 billion in sales and millions of jobs across the nation. So as Emily Menashe stated yesterday in the Red, White, and Blue Fisheries session, our fisheries are more than just the number of animals in the water. We also need to think about the sustainability of communities and economies that depend on our marine resources. NOAA is responsible for implementing the Magnuson-Stevens Fisheries Management and Conservation Act, which is actually celebrating its 50th anniversary next year. And one of the main goals of this act is to ensure the long-term biological and economic sustainability of the nation's fisheries. So achieving this goal truly depends on strong collaborations among science, management, and the fishing industry. So this virtual panel will spotlight the people, partnerships, and initiatives helping to fulfill the vision of making the United States the global leader in sustainable seafood. So now, the moment we've all been waiting for, I'm going to invite our panelists to introduce themselves and the work that they're doing to help revitalize the seafood sector. So to start, you'll each have 5 minutes to introduce yourself, your program, and how partnerships between federal agencies, industry, and seafood communities are helping to drive national seafood priorities, like the Executive Order Restoring American Seafood Competitiveness, into lasting results. So Danielle, we'd like to start with you.
Thank you, Megan, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending upon where you're tuning in from. I'm really excited to be here with you today and share some of the things that we have going on inside of NOAA Fisheries. I'm Danielle Blacklock, and I'm the director of the Office of Aquaculture. As Megan said, I sit within NOAA Fisheries, but I'm one piece of the NOAA Aquaculture program. We have capacity inside of NOAA Fisheries, researchers and regional aquaculture coordinators across the country. We also have folks in the National Ocean Service through the National Centers for Coastal and Ocean Science doing some of our biogeography, marine spatial siting analysis, finding places for farms to go in our marine waters. And we have partners in our oceanic and atmospheric research arm through the National Sea Grant College program and the great grant program that they run specific to aquaculture. You see, in the US, we eat farmed seafood. We consume about $15 billion worth of imported farmed seafood annually. That means we're sending $15 billion of hard-earned US money abroad into other economies. We're not only shipping that money abroad, we're also shipping those American jobs overseas. Another thing that we're shipping overseas is our research and technology. You see, in the United States, we drive technology development. Think AI, think machine learning. How healthy is the fish? How many oysters do you have out on your lease? Also, new feed development, pathogen and disease-free stocks. Those are some of just a few of the many technologies that the US has developed and then exported to other countries where they're used, and we then import back the seafood. Here's why that's a problem. It leaves us vulnerable. It's both a national security and a food security issue. We all remember those days of the pandemic when you couldn't go to the grocery store and get all of the things that you wanted necessarily. It's important that we have a domestic production here at home for those same reasons. Additionally, all of those countries that we're importing from don't have the same environmental laws or social laws. So how the protein is being grown and who's growing it and how they're being treated is not necessarily the same as it would be here in the United States. Aside from the fact that the economics are problematic, to be sending so much US money abroad rather than having it go the other way, where we export product and bring those funds into the US, that would be a stronger position for the United States. You see, when you purchase American seafood, you know you're making a good choice for your family. And it's our job in the aquaculture program and in NOAA Fisheries more broadly to make sure that we create opportunities for the amount of American seafood in our grocery stores to grow. NOAA's role is to provide science, planning, and investments that fuel domestic aquaculture development. We do that through a number of different ways. I'll highlight a couple of our scientific partnerships. So at our core in NOAA, we're a science agency. And last year, in partnership with the US Department of Agriculture and partner farmers, we launched a new state-of-the-art Northeast Oyster Breeding Center. So this group of researchers is using new advanced selective breeding techniques to find oysters that are more resilient to the changing water conditions around them. How do we make oysters that are more disease resistant? Not make, but breed for. This is a really exciting partnership that is multi-agency and in multiple states with multiple farms, and we're really excited about driving this success into the future. We're also in partnership bringing new species online. How do we get new species into our marketplace from an aquaculture farmed perspective? We're working with states and tribes, trying to find some of the solutions that our growers are facing. None of the work that we do is possible without partnerships. They're part of the foundation of our mission. And another way that we partner in some ways is through funding. So the Sea Grant program that I mentioned between 2018 and 2022 annually gave an average of 16.3 million, awarded for aquaculture competitive funding projects. That resulted in $6.9 million of economic impact. So 16 million out the door, almost 70 million of economic impact a year. That's a pretty great return on investment for Americans. You see, it's our partners who are out on the water growing the American seafood. So for us to know what's happening on the water, we also have to listen. And last year, I spent most of the year out on the road. I hosted 9 listening sessions across the country with industry, academia, tribal governments, state governments, trying to get a better grasp on what's happening within the world of aquaculture in the United States and what are the critical roles that NOAA plays. Some of the things I heard are broad support for our research, for regional aquaculture coordinators. They're like our local heroes, trying to get folks through the permitting process in federal waters in their regions. As well as broad support for our interagency work that we do inside the federal government and identification of AOAs, which hopefully I'll have time to cover later. I also heard about some of the things that are still needed. There's more needed related to regulatory cost, clarity of regulations, and efficiency. I also heard a lot about how there's more need for communicating what aquaculture looks like in the United States, because there's often a misperception of what aquaculture that is in the United States and that would be legally allowed in the United States would look like. So as I started with, we need more seafood, and aquaculture is a piece of that puzzle. I'm excited that we have a hardworking entrepreneurial team inside of NOAA working to make sure that we can get more American seafood on American plates, but we are only one piece of the puzzle, and my other panelists will share some of the other pieces.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Sarah, would you like to go next?
Thanks, Megan, and that was great, Danielle. I'm also really glad to be here and appreciate the opportunity to talk about what we are doing for seafood. As Megan mentioned, I'm Sarah Schaffler. I'm the National Seafood Strategy Coordinator for NOAA Fisheries. Some folks might be asking, what is the National Seafood Strategy? Well, as Megan mentioned and Danielle reiterated, seafood is good for people, good for the environment, and good for our economy. And our agency has a history of supporting the seafood sector and even building seafood markets. And when the Magnuson-Stevens Act was passed, our work moved away from building fisheries to managing fish as a resource. And we've done a good job. We've got a great system to maintain healthy stocks. We've got a management system to prevent overfishing and to address it when it happens and to protect species like dolphins and tunas affected by those fisheries. However, today the seafood sector is faced with a variety of concurrent challenges. We often call them unprecedented. There's changing ocean conditions, which are bringing about increased quantity and severity of storms that affect coastal infrastructure, including seafood infrastructure. We have aging infrastructure, an aging workforce, changing market dynamics, changing global market dynamics. And also the US needs to eat more seafood. So we've heard from industry loud and clear that more is needed in addition to our core work of science and management. Because as Megan reiterated, that sustainable seafood is more than just a sustainable stock, a sustainable species. It's sustainable businesses, sustainable communities. So we engaged in developing the agency's first national seafood strategy, and it was based on stakeholder input. And it identifies what we could do to better support the seafood sector, both, well, I would say the spectrum of wild capture to aquaculture in ways within our lane, and to make the seafood sector more competitive. Again, recognizing that our core science and management functions remain critical to sustainable seafood. And Megan mentioned that the Magnuson Act talked about conservation and management measures and the importance of that, of sustaining those stocks for the economy and the environment. Well, the Magnuson Act also talks about preventing overfishing while achieving optimum yield from each fishery. So when they talk about optimum yield, they mean the amount of fish that is caught. And the Magnuson Act talks about it, says that it's important to provide it so that it presents the greatest overall benefit to the nation, particularly with respect to food production. So it's not just environment, it's not just economy, this is about food. So the National Seafood Strategy, our aim there is to get more US seafood on US plates and to make the seafood sector more competitive, more resilient. That's the long and short of it. So in terms of how our partnerships are helping drive our national seafood priorities, well, a whole of government approach and working with partners will be critical to achieving what the executive order for restoring American seafood competitiveness sets out. And it's a key element in the current national seafood strategy. For example, a collaboration with USDA, University of Maine, and NOAA Fisheries worked a few years ago to identify how many commercial fishermen engage in direct marketing. Our international affairs, trade and commerce program works with our trade agencies on trade issues, provides technical assistance. And we also work with Sea Grant on aquaculture training and development. And these are just a few examples. Looking ahead, as we develop the America First Seafood Strategy, which is set out in the executive order I mentioned, we anticipate we'll build on this strategy as well as a national aquaculture development plan and add some elements while maintaining our core science and management functions. That's key, as I mentioned. And we'll build on a whole of government approach. So how can we really efficiently and more efficiently coordinate across this large federal system? I talked about some of the industry's challenges, and I want to mention that we've also seen, and if you watched the panel with Emily Menashes yesterday, she mentioned that there's been a decline in landings in the US of about 1 billion pounds. Also, we're not a strong, Danielle mentioned this, we're not the strongest global competitor in farming, despite a lot of resources to do so. And even though farm seafood is what we most often eat, and given that Americans on whole, we need to eat more seafood overall. So we're doing a number of things in terms of partnership, and we plan to do, and we'd like to do a number of things. So we're working with and within communities on adaptation planning. And Carissa will get into some of that. So the conditions and the world are changing. So how do we keep producing seafood and supporting communities in adapting? We hope we can better amplify a variety of our industry services in this way. So our loan programs for new vessels, processing plants, our seafood inspection program, seafood safety, market analysis, trade analysis, and communications. And we're working through how we can leverage these resources with those of possible partners, both public and private, to reach our goals of more US seafood on US plates and more competitiveness in the industry. For example, can a nascent federal program to support modernization of American maritime infrastructure be complementary to our loan programs for industry so that the nation can modernize our aging fishing fleet? Are there US programs like those for crop or farm insurance that can be expanded to fishermen while we leverage our technical support? Can we build on the success of communities to develop direct marketing infrastructure, like the Tuna Harbor Dockside Market in San Diego, the Port of Port Orford in Oregon, their plans for a seafood hub, and the Duck-Hamby Parish in Louisiana seafood market, where they sell a lot of US shrimp harvested locally? How can we leverage these opportunities that communities have created to somehow support new fisheries under development? For example, the buoy gear fishery on the West Coast, or new aquaculture businesses. There's so many ways we can create partnerships to really leverage complementary resources in efficient and strategic ways. And I, for one, and I know we're all really excited to continue developing these opportunities.
Thank you, Sarah. I know I'm excited as well. Carissa, would you like to jump in next?
All right, thanks, Megan. My name is Carissa Gervasi. I'm a research scientist at the University of Miami and an affiliate with the NOAA Southeast Fisheries Science Center. Today, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the Shrimp Futures Initiative, which is a project we launched late last year with the goal of helping the struggling domestic shrimp industry in the Gulf of America and South Atlantic. And it's a regional project of the National Seafood Strategy that Sarah just talked about. So historically, there was a general perception, I think, that so long as fish populations are healthy, that they're sustainably harvested, that their environments and ecosystems are healthy, then consequently, the fisheries that depend on those species would also be healthy. But we now recognize that this is not always the case. And to bring back what Emily Menashes said on the panel yesterday, that everyone's been talking about, even though our fish stocks are generally doing very well across the country, we're seeing a considerable decline in landings across the board. And a prime example of this is the shrimp fishery in the southeastern US. So a stock assessment was recently conducted for the Gulf of America shrimp fisheries. And according to the results, white and brown shrimp populations have never been undergoing overfishing and have very rarely been considered overfished. So the populations themselves are quite healthy, and shrimpers are currently harvesting less shrimp than is considered sustainable. So there's definitely room to harvest more. And there's also a clear demand for shrimp, as it's the #1 consumed seafood in the United States. But despite having a healthy shrimp population in our backyard and plenty of demand for shrimp in this country, the domestic shrimp industry is in peril. The main problem is actually not a management issue, but an economic one. So over the past 40 years, the price Gulf of America shrimp harvesters get for their product has declined by over 60%. At the same time, costs of doing business continue to increase, such that many shrimpers are unable to make ends meet. We've seen a continued consolidation of the fleet, such that Gulf landings in 2023 were 15% below the average of the previous 10 years and 24% below the average of the previous 50 years. Obviously, this is not a problem that we at NOAA Fisheries can solve on our own. So we knew immediately when embarking on the Shrimp Futures Initiative that it was going to require substantial collaboration with other agencies, the industry, and seafood communities. We knew that we were going to need to take a really multifaceted approach because the issues are complex and they can't be solved by only using traditional fisheries management tools. So the Shrimp Futures Initiative was created with the goal of understanding the profound challenges facing the Southeast shrimp fisheries and help prepare for their uncertain future. We have a wide variety of expertise in our core research group, and in collaboration with industry members, scientists, and other government agencies, we're working to examine the economic, social, cultural, and environmental challenges to the Southeast shrimp fishery and develop future scenarios based on the identified challenges, probable industry responses, and feasible interventions. The ultimate objectives of the initiative is to develop actionable solutions for maintaining a viable shrimp harvesting industry in the Southeast. So to get back to Megan's question, not only are partnerships among federal agencies, industry members, and seafood communities going to be absolutely going to help advance the goals of the Shrimp Futures Initiative, they're going to be absolutely vital to its success and for the long-term sustainability of this important industry.
Thank you, Carissa, and thank you all. It sounds like there's a lot of partnerships already in development, not just within government, but with industry members as well. And I can't wait to hear more about how these evolve and strengthen moving forward and see what we can achieve together to bolster our seafood economy. So moving into the next question, I want to ask, what lessons are emerging from your work that can inform future efforts to revitalize the U.S. seafood sector, such as maybe prioritizing community partners like we just discussed or public outreach? So for this one, let's start with Sarah.
Thanks, Megan. That's a great question. Well, one of the big lessons that we're all seeing is that community needs are changing with the changing market and ocean conditions. The competition with imports and rising costs that Carissa mentioned are affecting many fisheries. And in the Gulf, there are some communities who have worked together within their community and with federal and state agencies and other partners who are adapting and successfully. For example, that parish in Louisiana that built a seafood market, they continue to have a thriving shrimp industry in that community. They're also refurbishing docks, and plans to build a critically needed seafood hub for processing, refrigeration, and sales by the industry itself are underway. And they've done this with technical support from partners like Sea Grant and resources from a variety of state and federal agencies. So partnerships are critical. And what we're seeing among lessons learned and the elements they need are, and I see this repeated in other communities, they need information to spell out and quantify their needs and opportunities so that they can encourage investment, the kind of work that Carissa was talking about. They need a variety of funding opportunities. and they need community members willing and able to organize the community and research opportunities for funding and to go for them. In this, bringing people together is key to identify overlapping priorities. So in the public, private, nonprofit sectors, and any that I might be missing. There are a lot of opportunities to leverage things like Sea Grant, ocean clusters, state economic agencies, for example, to bring people together. And we're looking for more opportunities for wild capture and aquaculture to collaborate. For example, is there infrastructure in some communities that both sectors need for business opportunities? How can they collaborate to get the infrastructure funded from public and private sources? And of course, solutions need to be what a community has identified it needs. We're not, long gone are the days where we're the government that says we're the government and we're here to help, and then we do what we plan to do, or at least that's the stereotype. We're working directly with communities to identify and listen to them and identify what they need and what of those needs is within our lane to do.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Next, Carissa, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, thanks, Megan. So as part of the Shrimp Futures Initiative, we sort of started the project rolling with interviewing 29 experts on the industry. So this included people from Sea Grant, state agency representatives, researchers, et cetera, to really get the lay of the land and understand how the industry operates throughout the region. And then from there, we started traveling around the area and have so far met in person with 31 industry members across 6 states in the Southeast. And we've talked to everyone from single boat owner operators to large scale corporations that work in several areas of the shrimp supply chain. And this on the ground field work has been absolutely vital and has really helped us to understand what these shrimping communities look like, how they operate, and also the nuances to the various challenges that they're facing. So just to give some examples, I heard from one industry member that not only are the low prices and high costs driving people out of business, but they're also creating a more dangerous environment. So shrimping is already a hazardous occupation, but it's being made even more harrowing because boats are getting incredibly old and owners can't afford to properly maintain or replace them. And shrimpers are also going offshore with fewer or less experienced deckhands, which leads to a lot more injuries and even some casualties. And from a shrimp wholesaler and distributor that we spoke with, we heard about the difficulties of selling a seafood product that's only available at certain times of the year, and how important it is that quality processing is employed to fetch a competitive price. So these are just some examples of the nuances that we get about the issues that we'd only be able to know by talking to people directly. And we're also able to get a sense of what some success stories are. Kind of like what Sarah mentioned, there are some examples of people who are doing relatively well despite all of these challenges. And so talking to them, getting an idea of how they've been able to continue on despite these challenges can help us figure out what some possible solutions might be. So on top of everything that we've learned from these in-person conversations, building relationships with the industry members we're trying to support is incredibly important. If there's not that trust and mutual understanding with the industry, then whatever we do on the research side is not going to have nearly as much of an impact. So that's really vital. Prioritizing partners is super important. But also something we've learned from our conversations is that, especially with the shrimp industry, there's a real lack of public awareness around shrimp. So we've heard from many people that the public generally doesn't know where the shrimp they eat comes from, and that in order to increase consumption of domestic wild-caught shrimp, there's going to need to be large-scale marketing and communications efforts with seafood consumers to help them understand what they're buying and what all the benefits are to consuming local domestic shrimp. And I think that probably applies to a lot of other American seafood products, since the consumers really have the power to help a lot of these industries. But there's a general lack of awareness. And in some cases, I think that it's even domestic seafood is even an option for some people, but also that there are very real people and incredibly hardworking Americans that are behind the packs of seafood at the grocery store. So part of what we're trying to do with Shrimp Futures is also just humanizing these industries and bringing that education and awareness to consumers.
Great. Those are some amazing points, and I'm noticing some themes here. So Danielle, you want to take us home on this topic?
Sure. Thanks, Megan. And I echo a lot of what my co-panelists have said. So in terms of lessons learned, aquaculture is the fastest growing food system globally. And now more seafood is produced through that we eat is produced through aquaculture than wild harvest globally. The US is a small producer in a global context. We have a vibrant industry, but small. We rank 20th globally in terms of production, despite having a large landmass and the second largest exclusive economic zone in our oceans. That means that we have this opportunity to learn lessons not only domestically, but from those who have gone before us internationally. And there are two things that I draw from that. One is that our work has to be grounded in science. We have to put science first and use best available science in making our decisions. And that's what we do at NOAA. We're often the science body that informs some of the other permitting agencies. We have teams of researchers doing everything from better understanding the interactions with marine environment and taking that understanding and making tools that we can then, sort of plug and chug numbers to actually make the management decisions. We also, of course, I mentioned earlier that we're also trying to make the animals stronger and healthier themselves. We do a whole suite of science research. The other piece of this that I think the big takeaway is that we have to have a participatory process. The communities that are going to be affected by the growing seafood production need to be a part of the conversation. And that's where I think our effort on aquaculture opportunity areas really comes together. This is a process of planning, finding space in our marine environment where it may be appropriate for aquaculture to grow. And it's grounded in science and public participation. So currently, we are looking for aquaculture opportunity areas. We call them AOAs. We're looking for AOAs in 3 parts of our country. We started in the Gulf of America and in Southern California. The first step of that process is to develop an atlas. One off my shelf. This is quite literally an atlas. It is a 500-page document. It is the most sophisticated marine spatial analysis that has ever been done in the world. And it's done to find the right space for aquaculture to grow. We're really leading the way building these atlases with hundreds of data layers, thousands of participatory meetings to identify a small subset of areas. What I just showed you was the Gulf of America Atlas. We have one for Southern California. A small subset of areas that we then do a deep dive on. What would the impacts of aquaculture in these locations be? Positive, negative. How do we take this suite of options that the atlases have given us? We started with 9 in the Gulf of America and 10 in Southern California. How do we take these suite of actions and really options and really evaluate what the impacts would be? We did that through a National Environmental Policy Act, programmatic environmental impact assessment, impact statement, programmatic EIS, which is really bureaucratic legalese for doing a deep dive on impacts. We took a couple of years to do that deep dive. We created 30 new science products to inform that analysis. And that went out for a comment last spring. we're now finalizing that. It was in the fall, sorry. We're now taking all of that public input and finalizing those. And at the end of this process, when we publish our final environmental impact statements, we will identify aquaculture opportunity areas. This has been a multi-year planning process. These are not pre-permitted areas. Rather, we're leading proactively the evaluation of where space may be most appropriate. In addition to the Gulf of America and Southern California, where we are going to finalize those and make those big announcements this summer, so stay tuned. We're also working in the state waters of Alaska. So in partnership with the state, we're looking only at areas that are appropriate for shellfish and macroalgae or kelps and seaweeds, because that's what's legal in state waters. But we're working in partnership with the state to identify areas. We just closed a public comment period where we put out draft maps. So you could see the maps that are going to go into the atlas. This is a new step compared to the first round where we published atlases for Southern California and the Gulf of America. This is an added step, building that opportunity to engage with the public. That foundational of communities need to weigh in on how the industry grows, where the industry grows, and how they participate in it. So we created an additional opportunity for that public engagement in the state waters of Alaska. We're really excited about some of the comments that we got there. We're then going to finalize our atlases, send it through our robust peer review, and publish those and move on through the process and into the NEPA process for Alaska. It's a really exciting opportunity to proactively find space for aquaculture to grow, because it helps bring the community along with the journey of finding space rather than having an individual farm interact with the community. It's the entire public sector. It's interagency. We're working with all of the permitting agencies for aquaculture on these documents. Although it's not a permitting process, they're a part of it so that they're being informed by it and they are informing it themselves, making sure that we're covering all of the things that they think about when they are going through the permitting process. I'm really excited for this summer when we finally get to say, this is an aquaculture opportunity area and that is an aquaculture opportunity area. And then hopefully see applicants and farms coming into those spaces where we've done as much as we can ahead of the curve to make sure that we're finding the right space. Because when it comes to aquaculture, siting is everything. So that's why we're starting there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Danielle. It sounds like from all three of these discussions, we're learning a lot from on the ground, real world experiences about not just the challenges being faced in these industries, but gaining some ideas for how we can best support and revitalize our coastal communities. So some of the things I know that I heard, some of these themes were finding and sharing examples of success stories, because there are some out there, working with community leaders and liaisons to build trust, identifying and leveraging appropriate resources, marketing and communication to consumers. And then, as Danielle was just saying, prioritizing science, good science to inform sophisticated spatial planning and other processes that are needed to give us a good foundation for these industries. So before we jump to our final question, I just want to remind our audience to please place any questions you have in the Q&A feature in Zoom, and we'll do our best to answer them. And last but not least, Carissa, we'll go to you first. How can folks stay informed or get involved with NOAA's work in this arena?
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, I'll just kind of wrap up a little bit to say that as we continue with the Shrimp Futures Initiative, it's going to be really important to continue working with industry members, keeping them engaged and aware of the work that we're doing, but also build partnership with other government agencies. So like I think I mentioned before, the issues facing the domestic shrimp industry are not ones that the industry itself can solve. And they're not really ones that we at NOAA Fisheries can necessarily solve on our own either. So it's really going to take this whole of government approach. I feel like that term's been thrown out quite a bit this week. But it's true. It's going to take that to come up with these actionable solutions. And one of our main roles is going to be to facilitate these conversations and help everyone think critically about what the industry wants to achieve and what needs to happen for us to get there. So for anyone who wants to learn more about the project, we have a webpage on the NOAA website, which I think Megan will link in the chat. And you can also email us at shrimpfutures@noaa.gov.
Thank you, Carissa. And yes, I will put the links here for folks to access. Next, Sarah, same question, and any closing thoughts?
Thanks, Megan. Well, I think I'd say in closing out what I've been saying here, our seafood sector, which has been mentioned many times, is important to the American economy and jobs, communities, and putting nutritious food on our plates. And I have to say that connecting with and learning from our fishermen, farmers, and seafood communities has and continues to be a privilege, which I hold dear. And I really value it in providing more support and more services for our seafood sector. So we are working to lean into our services. For example, our loan programs, technical assistance, interagency collaboration, seafood inspection, safety research, market analyses, and management that adapts to changing systems, as well as workforce development. And of course, based on the sound science that's been mentioned a few times, and partnerships. So as for how folks can stay informed or get involved, well, there will be an opportunity for the public to provide input on what we can do. So to provide input on the Restoring American Seafood Competitiveness Executive Order and what we can do to make regulation, science, and management even more efficient. So keep an eye out for that, and please submit something if you feel so moved, including if you have ideas on partnerships with other agencies, private sector, et cetera, that can support that. We have a couple of newsletters, and I think Megan has links to several, where folks can learn about stories about seafood, the seafood sector, the people who harvest and process it, and our related work in support of that. So we have one for aquaculture, and we have a quarterly newsletter that just started last year called Taste of the Tides. And of course, we're always happy to get suggestions on what we can do in addition to our science and management work to better support the seafood sector. How can we leverage our industry services? What are market trends in your seafood community? So send us an email if you have something to share.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And yes, I've tried to share the links in the chat. Michael, might need your assistance to make sure those are visible to everyone. Last but not least, Danielle, would you like to share any closing thoughts and how folks can get involved?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today. This has been fun. I did misspeak. We didn't do 30 new science products. We did 19. So just fact checking myself. For the aquaculture opportunity areas in the Gulf of America and Southern California. How to stay in touch. We have a really great communications team here at NOAA Fisheries. They're small but mighty. I have communicators that are specific to aquaculture, and we put out videos and web stories and lots of social media content, including one of my favorite series, which is we called Tied to Table. It's the idea, it takes individual farmers and you go on a walk on their farm, you hear about their day-to-day life, and you learn their favorite recipe about how to cook what they grow. We have that series coming out fairly regularly, so please check our website. I know everybody on a weekend is like, you know what, I'm going to check the government website. But it is checked more than the Federal Register, which is the other way to engage with us. So the Federal Register is like the way that you can put in official public comment. And for those who are not checking it weekly, daily, as things come up for public comment, I hope you subscribe to some of our listservs, newsletters, follow us on Blue Sky, Instagram, LinkedIn, so that you get notified when those opportunities come up. We do have a number of opportunities in the pipeline to engage with the public, and they'll all be announced on our suite of platforms. So I hope that you sort of create that connection more long-term than this hour that we have with you. And then my closing thought is eat US seafood. Wild harvested, farmed, on land, in wrasse, from a pole, from a trawl. US seafood is sustainable and they complement each other. We need the whole spectrum and we need people to be eating more of it. That's the takeaway, is eat US seafood, please. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Danielle. And I feel like I don't even need to close this up because you just summarized it so perfectly. We do need a wide range of US seafood, including wild caught and aquaculture. So I want to thank all of our panelists so much for all of your input on these questions. Remind our audience to place any questions they have in the chat. We still have a few minutes left. And while we're waiting for folks to share their questions, I'm going to throw out a question of my own that I've been dying to ask, especially since Danielle just said something about seafood recipes, and I'm hungry because it's lunchtime where I am. So what are your favorite seafood recipes? Or if you had to pick just one, what would it be? And a follow-up on that is, do you have advice for folks on how to stay informed about where their seafood comes from? I'll leave it to you guys, see who wants to jump in first. Sarah?
Well, I can't pick just one. I love all my children. But I live in San Diego, so I'll mention a couple of products here. We have a number of large pelagics or tunas and shark, and I really love smoking them and making a smoked dip. We also have sablefish up and down this coast, and it was mentioned in yesterday's panel too, but also marinating and smoking that. It's pretty darn delicious. Actually oysters from our coast. We don't have so many in San Diego, but we have those plenty in Oregon and Washington, and they are fabulous. And was there another part to your question?
Advice for how folks can stay informed about where their seafood comes from.
Ask the person who's selling it to you. Sometimes they'll know, and if they don't know, then it's probably not from the US. But just ask your server, ask your person at the meat counter, ask your fishmonger. And if you're buying from the fisherman, ask the fisherman or the farmer.
Great. Thank you, Danielle or Carissa. Favorite seafood recipe?
I would say I don't have a favorite. I'm a seafood eater. But right now, your support eating any US seafood is helpful, but especially sablefish. Sablefish, the stock is growing and there's a lot to move in the marketplace, and it happens to be my favorite fish. So I really like just rubbing miso paste on it for a half hour and then wipe that off, or it will be way too salty. Lesson learned. Wipe off the miso paste, and then it's super forgiving because it's really fatty. So you can't overcook it. So that's a favorite. And I am always a big fan of shucked oysters. It's a requirement in the Office of Aquaculture that you have to try to shuck your own oysters. Not everyone eats them, but you have to at least learn how to shuck. And that is just a fan favorite in my household.
Sounds delicious. Carissa, favorite recipe? I'm going to guess it has to do with shrimp.
Well, shrimp is one, of course, but I mean, you can't go wrong with shrimp. There's just so many things you can do with it. You can throw it in a soup. You can just like sear it real fast in butter, like just so simple to use. But in the Southeast, in the Gulf, like we're the land of the snapper. Like red snapper is the king of the Gulf, and like a panko crusted snapper is just very, very good. So yeah, and I guess like to the question of like figuring out if your seafood is local, that can be kind of challenging. Especially, in restaurants, sometimes you don't always know where the fish comes from. So yeah, just use your voice, ask your server, where is this from? Even if you're sitting at a restaurant that's like on the ocean overlooking shrimp docks, like that doesn't necessarily mean the shrimp on your plate is from a domestic source. So yeah, just always asking, like Sarah said.
Great points. Thank you all so much. Now I'm sufficiently hungry. So our time is coming very quickly to a close. I want to thank each of our panelists for their contributions to this discussion and for their ongoing work to revitalize the American seafood sector on both the wild-caught and aquaculture fronts. Like I said, we placed some relevant links in the chat, all of which can be found at fisheries.noaa.gov. If you have nowhere else to go, that's your one-stop shop for all of our information that we shared today. And I want to thank everyone for joining today, and we hope you continue to enjoy Capitol Hill Ocean Week. Thank you.